Does your waifu suck? That's the question that I think a lot of people gonna ask after this video, as we are gonna be talking about Quintessential Quintuplet, which is the collab from DBT12. As much as collab is disdained upon for some people and well loved by some people, it is definitely an interesting mechanic to bring, as it does bring a breath of fresh air into the game as a whole due to its wacky mechanic. And before we go any further, I'm talking about the game as a whole, not the meta aspect of it.
So, I believe I made myself clear.
So, are these 5 brand new decks for each of the main nation good enough to be in the meta? Well, that is something we have to look into, doesn't it? And that is exactly what we're gonna be discussing today. So if you guys enjoy this kind of content, consider clap that subscribe button, as it will help me tremendously. And without further ado, let's get into the core of the Quintessential Quintuplet. Quintuplets or Gotobun's main mechanic is all about memories, as depend on how many cards are there in the memories and how many different names are there, following effects can be activated, range from power or just simply higher shield value to how each of the Gotobun is played individually. But one thing that more or less is a common theme among all the 5 decks is the way the right line works. The grade 1 generate crests with the exception of Yosaba, which does straight up search for 1 card in your deck and set it into memory. The grade 2 help you to fetch 1 card into the memory based on your top 7 cards. The grade 3 allow you to choose up to 2 quintuplet cards, 1 goes into hand and another 1 goes into the memory. And last but not least, the order that allow you to return up to 2 duplicates Gotobun, 1 back to the deck and 1 into the memory to activate this effect based on how many different Gotobun you have in your memory. And that is more or less pretty much the main mechanic. And is it a good mechanic? To an extent, yes and no. This is due to the fact that as much as the deck filter very well for the Gotobun cards, the deck relies heavily on the memories. So if you fail to obtain the memory that you needed at any part of your game, your board is considerably held back. And not only that, if you fail to draw any grade 3s for the personal riding, you are definitely losing a lot of advantage, because that is currently one of the best way to get the advantage in the Gotobun deck. However, each of the Gotobun deck does have a different way to get around this issue. So now let's get into the very first quintuplet that we're gonna talk about, Ishika. Being the Dragon Empire representative, Ishika definitely play a part of the nation that she is in, as her main mechanic is all about retiring and guard restrict. And if you ask me, is it better than Eugene or Gandiva, I would have to say she's in between Gandiva and Eugene.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
She's not as broken as Gandiva, but she is not as problematic to play as Eugene. You see, all her retire effects does give you a secondary benefit. Like for example, with the grade 2 and the order, she gets a draw when you fail to retire. With the grade 3, if you fail to retire, you still get a power boost skill that she has, but instead of just based on the power that of a unit that you retire, you just get straight up 10k, which is very substantial. But I do have to say, the best part about her deck is lies in her constant skill, as she gives a turn while guard restrict of 2 or more cards from their hand. And that is where the problem of her deck comes in. Because of her ability is so powerful, they have to kind of nerf the other parts of her deck, making it a little bit more balanced and allow you to play certain generic support that Dragon Empire do have, ideally with Tribash. And because of that, her deck, I would have to say personally, are the weakest out of the 5.
I do believe I'm on fire.
All the Gotobun decks are good, but I do have to say Ishika has at least to offer out of the 5 due to the fact that it is half reactive deck, which means that if opponents choose not to call Regard to the field, you kind of lose half of what she is normally capable of. And not only that, yes, you can use Tribash to get additional crit, but the fact that you still rely on Trigger as the order are not very good to run, it still hurt the deck nonetheless. Moving on to Nino.
Hello, my name's Nino.
And the best way to describe her playstyle for me is one single word: Shadow Stitch. And yes, that's a one word. For those who don't know what Shadow Stitch is, it's a mechanic that activates when the attack doesn't hit. So that's exactly what Nino does for her grade 2 version and her grade 3 Vanguard skill. Essentially, these two units restand themselves if the attack doesn't hit and gain following benefit based on which card was it. For the grade 2, it's a free draw when you have 5 or more different memories, and for the Nino grade 3 herself, it resets her crit and drive to 1, giving her 3 guaranteed drive per turn. And that is where I feel it's a problem of the deck. The grade 3 and the grade 2 are extremely reactive, as if you pull a bad trigger pull at any timing, her deck is immediately hold back, and that was the big problem with Shadow Stitch in the past as well. However, Murakumo was able to make up for that with the sheer amount of attack the deck can dish out over time, but Nino only have 3 to begin with. And to make things worse, I feel that yes, get additional crit for 6 or more memories on the Vanguard is a good thing, but I feel it's a little bit too weak compared to the other effect that we have seen with the other Gotobun. And the only redeeming feature I have to say with Nino is definitely the Order card, as it is the strongest out of the 5 due to its powerful first effect, which is literally just Monster Reborn, and plus that Monster Reborn you need 5k, and that is actually huge because it helps your deck to more or less get a rear guard that can hit the Vanguard, so forcing the opponent to guard and eventually chain into more attacks. So overall, I would have to say Nino, as much as it is the most reactive deck out of all, it is also the scariest because the moment you react to it, it will bite back really hard. Then we have everybody's favorite Gotobun, Miku. And in my honest opinion, among all the 5 Gotobun we have seen, Miku is definitely the most consistent due to the fact that she has the least amount of commitment needed to put into. This is due to the fact that her order is really bad. Like, the only thing that it does is plus power to the Vanguard and plus power to the front row at the final effects. This means that you don't actually need to have 5 order to act to go full power on this deck, though hitting 6 different memories still is a plus for her, as she does give 10k to her entire front row. And her main mechanic is Kairi. She bounce back cards and she call back cards, and her grade 2 actually supports the playstyle while restanding the back row, allowing you to boost with the unit first before you restand them back with the grade 2, allowing you to form more draws and a much higher power as well. And because of that, I would have to say Miku has the least amount of problem that needed to be dealt with. This is also due to the fact that Mikani exists for the free soul that you needed.
No, God!
And overall, I have to say, as much as I am not in Miku camp with when the anime was on air, she's definitely getting a biggest dub among the 5. Now, let's move on to my favorite girl from the Gotobun, Yotsuba. And my honest opinion with Yotsuba is she is very hard to judge compared to the other 4. This is due to the fact that she has a very different playstyle, where the other 4 of the Quintuplet has a focus on the aggression, the offensiveness of the game. Yotsuba plays very defensively, and she's actually capable of pull off her mechanic well as well, as her main mechanic is an auto win con.
Holy shit, look at this fucking animation!
You see, her goal is to increase the number of cards in your memory as much as possible until it hit 14 with 7 different memories in your memory, and you have to last at least 1 more turn to actually get a win con. And her support gears toward that aspect of it, with her grade to allow you to bind a memory card from deck that is Gotobun, while her Vanguard on hit onto the Vanguard is also help you to set a memory from the drop zone into the memory zone. And on top of that, her order at the maximum power, so enable one of your red card to have a draft check and put them into a memory zone at the end of the battle, building all the memories to hit 14 very quickly, provided you are on a luckier side of life. And a lot of people might ask, hey, why do you consider that final skill from the order? You see, among all the 5 Gotobun, Yotsuba is the easiest to reach 7 different names with her skill, and because of that I have to take into consideration of this part, which is why it is a little bit hard to judge her harder because she's played the most well into the memory mechanic, which is kind of poetic in an essence. But as we all know by now, a defensive deck in Vanguard is just a little bit problematic because of the fact that every single deck in Vanguard is essentially a defensive deck due to drive checks. But despite all that, her deck it is not impossible to pull off as long as you are very careful about the way you defend, the way you play your board, and the way you control your opponent board. Then we have Itsuki, and you know what? I'm just gonna say a few keywords about her main mechanic, and that should be enough for you to know how annoyingly bust this deck is. Front row Skull Dragon power level, with standing Vanguards, the order give you free draw and additional drive at the full power, and the Vanguard give even more free draw and power. That's all I'm gonna say. So, is there any Gotobun deck on the watch list that is gonna be a menace in DBT 12? Well, there is 2 particular decks that I have in my mind, and that is Itsuki thanks to the Skull Dragon power level, and Miku thanks to how easy it is for this deck to get 5 attacks. And for the rest of the deck, you might see them play here and there as like a rogue deck option, but I feel the other 3 decks are not as threatening as the 2 I mentioned earlier. So what do you guys think? What are the best Gotobun decks in your opinion? Do leave down in the comments below whether are you going to stick to your favorite girl or are you going to stick to your meta. And that's all I have for today guys. Take care of yourself, and this is McMegane signing out.